Welcome, everybody, to Boston 9/11 Truth. I am Susan Serpa, and I'm here with Kevin Barrett. And today is February 19th, 2026. And as I say, we have Kevin Barrett with us. He's joining us from Monaco. And
Morocco.
Morocco, sorry. And he has a very special presentation for us today. But before we begin, I'm going to just quickly go through our guidelines for our guests and our participants. Um, Everyone is to be respectful during the presentation. Uh, Please keep yourselves muted. Save your questions to the end of the presentation, which will take about 20 minutes, half an hour. And then we'll have Q&A at the end, and you can raise your electronic hand for the questions. And remember, your questions are to be on topic. This is Boston 9/11 Truth. So, of course, the topic is the lies about 9/11. Other topics that don't relate to 9/11 are not for this platform. And within the 9/11 platform, please keep your questions addressed to what Kevin addresses in his presentation. So beyond that, quick disclaimer, Boston 9/11 Truth it promotes activism for getting at the truth about 9/11. And the views and opinions expressed by our guest speakers and our participants are not necessarily the views of Boston 9/11 Truth. They could be, but for some of us. But we are a nonpartisan group with a bunch of varied opinions about 9/11. And we're just about free discussion and free speech to get at the truth. That's our philosophy. So, uh, without any further ado, I welcome Kevin. Um, and his topic will be Six Countries in 25 Years. Iran Defies the 9/11 Perps. You can see Kevin's last article last September on Truth Jihad Substack about the Turning the Tide event, which I gave everybody a link for that. He's an Islamologist scholar and one of America's best-known critics of the war on terror. He has, from 1991 to 2006, Dr. Barrett taught at colleges and university in San Francisco, Paris, and Wisconsin. In the summer of 2006, Dr. Barrett was attacked by a group of Republican state legislatures who called for him to be fired from his job at the University of Wisconsin-Madison due to his political opinions. Since 2007, Dr. Barrett has been informally blacklisted from teaching in American colleges and universities. He ran for Congress in 2008 and currently works as a nonprofit organizer, public speaker, author, and radio host. His website is truthjihad.com. His books include Truth Jihad, My Epic Struggle Against the 9/11 Big Lie, 9/11 and the American Empire, Christians, Jews, and Muslims Speak Out, and he was one of the editors uh, for Volume 2. Um, Truth, Jihad, My Struggle Against the 9/11 Big Lie. And he has contributed an essay in No Plane Crashes on 9/11, Exposing the Illusion. So welcome, Kevin. Take it from there.
Okay, well, thank you. And by the way, I'm actually not a quote unquote no planer, but I did contribute an essay to that
Okay.
particular book as well as to many other books. So, uh, in terms of the 7 countries in 5 years thing, right? That's what we're now behind schedule. It's been 6 countries in 25 years, and the seventh and most important is Iran. I'm, of course, borrowing that quote from General Wesley Clark, who revealed a couple of years late that he had been approached yeah, maybe a month and a half after 9/11 by a neocon from the Defense Department, presumably one of Wolfowitz's minions, who informed him that it's actually worse than I told you, right after 9/11. We're not only going to invade Iraq, which Clark had been informed right after 9/11, but he said, what is that? Well, Iraq had nothing to do with this. Well, now, 2 months later, he hears it's actually worse than that, much worse. We're going to try to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to go after Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, and end it with Iran, the big kahuna. So, what were those 7 countries about? Why those particular 7 countries? Why was 9/11 set up to take out those 7 countries? And the most important being Iran. And the reason for that is that 9/11 was a policy coup. That is, hardliners who wanted to hijack American military power on behalf of Israeli expansionism did 9/11 in order to essentially terrorize the American people into going along with their designs. And so today, here we are, 25 years later, and country number 7, Iran, is in the bullseye of the 9/11 perpetrators. And so, how did we get there? Well, I'm going to just very, very quickly give a very concise and probably oversimplified historical timeline here. First, for 2,500 years, there's been a Jewish ideology that is fanatically ethnocentric, and that has, that they're far not the only group that's ethnocentric, but they've really perfected it. And the people of this religion slash ideology have included extreme fanatics, and as well as those who are not extreme fanatics for 2,500 years. And the fanatics have largely hijacked Judaism over the past century with their messianic millenarian Zionist project. That is their plan to achieve the Jewish millenarian messianic dream of conquering and enslaving the Goyim, that is the non-Jews, by way of rebuilding their temple in Jerusalem and making that the capital of the world. And of course, that is a radical spin-off from Judaism. It's not entirely mainstream Judaism per se, but it actually is pretty mainstream Jewish eschatology. So this tradition of thought that goes back for centuries has informed an extremely radical form of Jewish nationalism that's become Zionism, which basically argued that God gave us this land thousands of years ago. So we have the right to invade it and slaughter and expel the people there, just like Joshua did in the Bible. And then, we're going to build up our power there. And then this ideology justified itself with claims of being the victims, as these people have forever, of course. So this is the historical backdrop to the then post-World War II, the creation of the State of Israel required a lot of power being exercised by the United States, the most powerful country post-World War II. So it's been a struggle for power in the United States between, let's say, regular old American imperialists and Zionist fanatics who actually care a lot more about Israel than about America. And some landmarks of that struggle have included a long list of murders, including the murders of the Kennedys, which were done by the State of Israel, I believe, as Lauren Guilleneau and Michael Collins Piper, among others, have persuasively argued. And then finally, 9/11, which, as I said, was designed to hijack American military power on behalf of the State of Israel and its expansionist designs. So that's the run up to the 7 countries in 5 years that were targeted. Iran was the most important because Iran is both the most powerful of those 7 countries. It's got the biggest population, I believe. I forget what Sudan used to have before the Zionists broke it up. But it also has its very strong technical base, and it has an ideology of anti-imperialism, anti-Zionism, and principled independence. That is, since the 1979 revolution, the leadership in Iran has insisted on its right to run the country the way they see fit, and in particular, to side with the oppressed people of the earth. The Mustazafin is what they call them. And nobody's more oppressed than the Palestinian genocide victims. So the Iranian government, since 1979, has been a staunch supporter of the Palestinian people in its resistance against Zionist genocide. And that's why Iran was put on that list as country number 7, the most important country targeted by the 9/11 perps. And their effort to overthrow these countries met mixed success. They got way behind schedule, even in Iraq. But they did manage to badly damage all of those countries except for Iran. And so here we are 25 years later, and Donald Trump has sent an armada, quote unquote. Recalling that word is interesting. It recalls this fabled Spanish Armada, which met the same fate that this armada might conceivably meet. Although in that case, it was the hand of God and the weather that destroyed the Spanish Armada. And it will be more likely anti-ship missiles that will be damaging or sinking part of the American Armada if this thing continues to go the way it's going. So that's kind of where we stand right at this moment. And to jump back into a new 9/11 detail that's just arisen that is related to this and supports my contention that 9/11 was essentially done by the State of Israel. If the Epstein files release included some very interesting material in which Ghislaine Maxwell, the Mossad agent who worked with Epstein to blackmail American leadership so that Israel could control the United States and other countries. She's the daughter of Bob Maxwell, one of the biggest Mossad spies ever. Ghislaine Maxwell was actually invited by Edward J. Epstein, no relation to Jeffrey, I don't think, maybe a second or third cousin, I don't know, to join the so-called top secret shadow 9/11 Commission. Well, what's that about? There's been a bit of speculation, but not. I think most of the people who've been talking about this on the internet have not really fully understood who Edward J. Epstein really is, or was. He died a few years ago. So this Edward J. Epstein, who was setting up a shadow 9/11 commission that Ghislaine Maxwell was invited on, it's still totally top secret. Nobody knows, who else was on this commission. So who accepted if Ghislaine didn't? This Epstein guy, I ran into him back in the night, not personally, but I discovered what a scumbag he was during the late 70s, I believe it was, when I started looking into the JFK assassination in 75, when I was a junior in high school, and I saw Mark Lane speak about the Zapruder film showing that it couldn't have been Oswald who killed Kennedy. And so I started researching that. And lo and behold, I think it was like right around that commission, the House Assassinations Commission in the 70s was in posing a threat to blow the JFK case wide open. And they were going to get testimony from a certain George de Mohrenschildt, who is Lee Harvey Oswald's CIA handler and a personal friend of George H.W. Bush. De Mohrenschildt complained in the run up to him being called to testify before the House assassinations investigation that the Jews were harassing him. And he begged his close friend, George H.W. Bush, to do something about that and protect him. And George H.W. Bush responded to de Mohrenschildt, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. So de Mohrenschildt was being interviewed by Edward J. Epstein, the guy who invited Ghislaine Maxwell onto the Shadow 9/11 Commission decades later. Yeah. So this is in the late 70s, around the time of the JFK House investigation.
Uh-oh, you're breaking up again.
J. Epstein scheduled 3 days with George de Mohrenschildt. Maybe I should be recording on this end too, just in case.
You were breaking up there. We couldn't really get the last sentence.
Okay. So I just requested to record because that way everything on my end will be well preserved. If you could just give me permission to record, then I can do that.
I don't see where that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I just go ahead?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if you're recording or not. I don't see a request to share or how to share recording. I can't find that.
Okay, well, don't worry about it. I'll just do my best. And my internet is supposedly good now. So I don't know if it's on my end or what's going on.
Okay.
So anyway, so George de Mohrenschildt, a key witness in the Kennedy assassination, scheduled 3 days of interviews with Edward J. Epstein, who presented himself as a researcher and author. And during the second day of interviews, they broke for lunch. And that was the end of the interviews and of George de Mohrenschildt, because he didn't show up for that afternoon session because he was found with his head blown off in his own bathroom, a shotgun wound, and it was ruled a suicide. Oh. Edward J. Epstein very likely set de Mohrenschildt up for assassination by the Jews. That's what de Mohrenschildt had been. He said he was threatened by the Jews. He was being harassed by them. He begged for protection from George H.W. Bush, who refused to provide it. So Epstein, who, as it turns out, was a close colleague of none other than the number one suspect in the JFK assassination, James Jesus Angleton. Angleton is widely suspected by all experts in the JFK assassination of having been, if not the key CIA perpetrator, certainly one of the top two. Well, basically, he's mostly seen as the key CIA perpetrator of the JFK assassination. And Angleton was also a Mossad agent. He was a mole. He had Israeli loyalties. He worked closely with the founders of the Israeli Mossad, and his entire career was devoted to protecting Israel, not the United States. And so Angleton was a close colleague of Epstein. He was Epstein's number one source for everything Epstein did in terms of this. Epstein, I believe, probably was part of essentially a shadow JFK commission in the 1960s and 1970s. He pretended to be a researcher, but what he was really doing was checking for leaks and then helping the Israeli Mossad and their gangster assets plug those leaks by doing things like murdering George de Mohrenschildt. That's who Epstein was. And so this is the guy who apparently was inviting people like Ghislaine Maxwell to serve on a shadow 9/11 commission. Uh, so make of that what you will, but certainly what I make of it is that it just is more evidence that this billionaire class of rabid tribal supremacist Jews who are constantly dropping the word goyim, which is like the N word, but it refers to non-Jews, in the Epstein emails. Uh, those people obviously did 9/11. I mean, how obvious does it have to get? And then we had them conspiring afterwards in the cover-up to do things like follow, what the Truth Movement and what the 9/11 Commission was looking at and figuring out, and then they would, of course, be ahead of the game and plug any leaks, as they did with having George de Mohrenschildt's head blown off. Okay, so the essentially what we have now is the United States has been hijacked by fanatical Jewish supremacist, psychopathic, Zionists, people who are loyal to their tribe and to their tribe's crime base, their genocidal project in occupied Palestine, not to the United States. And they've hijacked the United States through these coups, the JFK coup, the 9/11 coup, and so on, and the Trump coup, right? The fake Trump shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania was another of these Zionist publicity stunts. It's quite obviously. And now they're trying to, finish off that list of 7 countries in 5 years. Their stooge Trump and out the power to have not just and probably executed for the kind of crime front man and his long career as a rapist and a rapist of young girls. They have Trump over a barrel, and that's why Trump, no other American president would ever have done this. Even Dick Cheney, wasn't going to try, get a big war with Iran going. That's a guaranteed loser for the United States. But the Israelis, they don't care if the United States goes down. They don't care if thousands of American service people die. And they don't care if the U.S. empire sinks faster than it was supposed to. That's fine with them as long as they keep increasing their power. So they've got Trump over a barrel, and they're using their control of the White House, which they've always had a lot of influence in the White House, but never before did the most extreme, psychopathically genocidal wing of the Israeli Jewish Zionist power structure have this kind of control over an American president. And so they've got Trump, forced him to send this armada and start what very likely could turn into a terrible war, if not outright World War III. We do have Russia and China, of course, running drills with Iran even now, the last couple of days. They've been running naval drills, practicing shutting the Straits of Hormuz, doing anti-terror drills, and so on and so forth. So we're right on the brink of something awful. And the people who are doing this are the same people who killed the Kennedys, the same people who did 9/11, Jewish supremacist, tribalist, genocidal psychopaths, the people who run the state of Israel, who look down on the Goyim and look forward to a day when all the Goyim will be even more enslaved than they are today, when they can treat 13, 14-year-old non-Jewish girls the way Jeffrey Epstein and all of his friends did, which is just totally normal with all these people, even progressives like Noam Chomsky. That's, the tribal conditioning these people grow up with is so extreme that, even a lot of the relatively enlightened ones like Chomsky end up being essentially psychopathic tribal loyalists and end up cavorting with the likes of Epstein and the billionaire class of Jewish Zionist lunatics who currently dominate the United States and the world. So that's my take. And I don't want to go on and on about this forever. I'm sure you're interested in various kinds of specifics and so on. So I'll turn it over to the audience for questions.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Anyone have a question or, yeah, Roy, go ahead.
Just a comment right there at the end. Hi, Kevin. You
Hi.
said, you said it's been a long time since I was hearing your podcast, like in 2010 or something. No, I just recalled that I heard Chomsky identify himself with a Zionist. I'd have to go back and find all the details of that, but it wasn't a big secret. He declared himself to be a Zionist, and so I guess he was. That was all.
Yeah,
Just
Chomsky actually said that he said the highest
yeah,
point in his
yes.
life was his year on a kibbutz when he was young.
And when I saw him speak at MIT in the late 60s, he said he might move to Israel.
Right, right. So yeah, you can see why he's hanging around with Epstein and basically working that side of the street. And that's why he always opposed getting to the truth of the JFK assassination and 9/11, because I think he knew that Israel did it and he was on Israel's side. That was his job, was to try to divert American progressives from looking at things like that.
Yeah, well, something else might come up, but that was just my comment of the moment. We have ha other hands up now, so I'll pass it on to somebody else. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Roy.
Yep.
Next we have Tim Olson. Go ahead, Tim.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. So I have two questions. I was wondering first if you could comment on if there's military escalation now in the Middle East, if Iran barrages Israel with such an amount of missiles, do you think at what point would Israel resort to using a nuclear weapon? And two, I wonder if you could make a broader comment on besides Chomsky, are certain elements of the left, so to speak, somewhat compromised. Going back to possibly going back to COINTELPRO, for example. I'm sure you've seen 9/11 truth coverage on Democracy Now, and you can see the coverage of any sort of thing, any sort of subject, the difference between Democracy Now and say the gray zone, right? Both are, I would categorize as far as leftist media, but it seems Democracy Now, there's certain things they don't want to say, or topics they avoid. I haven't checked in the past few days, but they haven't. Last I checked, they didn't mention anything about Chomsky being in the Epstein files. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those are two good questions. Yeah, thanks, Tim. So, uh, as far as Israel using nuclear weapons, that's always possible. But I don't think that they have the ability to stop Iranian rocket fire. It's very likely that Iran has the equivalent of a nuclear deterrent in terms of the amount of rocket fire that it can rain down on Israel. And specifically, Iran can destroy the Dibona nuclear site and perhaps other nuclear sites in Israel, contaminating Israel. And that would be the equivalent of a nuclear strike. So I think that Israel would probably think twice about doing that. And then there's, of course, the Chinese and Russians have come in very much on the side of the Iranians. Since the June War, Iran reversed its policy and started cooperating with Russia and China in a big way. And the Israelis they may have bit off more than they can chew this time. But we'll of course have to see how it plays out. But whether the Americans and the Israelis, I think they like to imagine that they can exert some kind of major escalation dominance. But with all of those American ships, plus all the bases in the region, plus all of the oil installations in the region, in the gun sites of Iranian missiles, and with Israel and Dimona and so on in the gun sites of Iranian missiles, I'm not really sure that they do have escalation dominance. That would be the end of the American empire and the end of the Zionist entity if this went all the way to, Tehran and other Iranian cities being obliterated with nuclear weapons, Israel being largely obliterated, and 10,000 Americans dead. That would that'd be the end for both the U.S. and Israel, or at least the end of America as a major factor on the world stage. And it'd be the end of Israel, period. So I don't think that they have that escalation dominance the way they might imagine they do. So moving to the question about Amy Goodman versus the gray zone, that's an interesting question. And I think that it does illustrate the difference between Jews like Amy Goodman, whose father was a rabbi, who still have a vestige of some combination of a tribal loyalty or fear of their mafiosi co-religionists, And I did speak. I've spoken with Amy Goodman about this. She said to me once, Kevin, I'm sure glad that you're the one doing this 9/11 thing rather than me. And then I've also heard reports that she's said, when people say you need to talk about what really happened on 9/11, she says, "Are you trying to get me killed?"
Mm.
Well, so I think there's people like her, the a Jewish-dominated left-wing media ecosystem that won't go there on stuff like 9/11, JFK, tribalist Jewish control of America, the Jewish oligarchy. All this stuff is completely off limits. No, no, it's we've been told that you can't talk about any of that stuff. And he respects those for reasons that were connected to Jewish background, better connected actually than Amy Goodman. Sid Blumenthal, Max's father, was, is, I guess, a very powerful, influential figure among kind of a certain mainstream of the American Jewish community. He was a close associate of Hillary Clinton, apparently involved to some extent in the destruction of Libya. Anyway, Max, Sid's son, he's basically deprogrammed himself from this tribalism. He's looked at this Jewish tribalism and Zionism around him and is horrified by it and of a truth jihad. And God bless him for that. But yeah, there's a huge difference there between the gray zone, which is much more honest and forthright, and Democracy Now!, which is kind of I'm not quite sure the best way to put it, but it's in some sense you could see it as controlled opposition because it's running interference for this group that's been perpetrating these most atrocious political crimes, whether it's the genocide of Palestine by way of the Zionist billionaire oligarch control of the United States, the Kennedy assassinations, and so on and so forth.
All right, thank you. We lost some of that because of the unstable internet. I'm pretty sure it's at your end, Kevin. But I think we could piece it together what the essence of your answer was, hopefully. Next we have Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I would just like to explore what constitutes the planes versus no planes argument. I've been really looking for a definitive answer of can this be debated or something, and it's really difficult because a lot of people are really adamant with their position and say, no, we will not debate because we know the truth already and forget it. And I'm getting frustrated. So I just wondered if you had any input on the subject.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I looked at that debate pretty intensively in around the sort of 2009 through like 2011 timeframe. There was a conference that Jim Fetzer organized in Vancouver that got very much into the nitty gritty of this, and another one that Fetzer organized in Madison in 2006 or seven as well, that included some of the leading people in on the no plane side, and essentially, I guess I would argue that you can either see it as maybe there were somehow there were no planes in that the no plane scenario, and of course we're talking about 4 different alleged crash sites with different factors for all of them. So let's say the no planes people are completely right about there not having been any plane crashes whatsoever at any of those 4 sites, meaning that the buildings in New York were hit with some kind of explosives, but no planes went into them, and likewise with the Pentagon and perhaps even Shanksville. I don't know. If that were the case, then that would explain a couple of these certain kinds of video evidence and things like that. But that would also leave a lot of other things that would be more difficult to explain. And for me, those included things like the photographs of the holes in the buildings in New York that were largely consistent with plane crashes. Some of the no planes arguments are clearly fallacious in terms of things like, they couldn't possibly go through the buildings. The planes couldn't enter the buildings at all. Not necessarily true, given that at those speeds, the way planes act, the way bodies act when they collide is very, very different, orders of magnitude greater in terms of the energy expended by the collision than would be the case in a kind of a more normal plane crash, the plane just going a couple hundred miles an hour or 100 miles an hour instead of 600. At 600 miles an hour, the Dwayne Dietz, the NASA engineer, has described how the behavior of the crash could be very different from these other kinds of crashes that people claim are, what a plane crash should look like. So in any case, I looked at all this stuff, and essentially the arguments against the no planes theory, including eyewitness testimony from all sorts of people, everybody in New York that I talked to in the 9/11 Truth Movement, basically, and some like cops and first responders and ordinary New Yorkers, like everybody heard these low-flying, extremely loud planes. Everybody heard it. Lots of people saw the second one and were pointing their cameras in that direction. So the problem of how that would all be faked and how all of these people would be led to believe that their ears had been blown out by the scream of a low-flying plane at 600 miles an hour, and in many cases that they actually witnessed the plane. How's that explained? So anyway, you look at the evidence, and it looks easier to me to say that the apparent video evidence supporting the no plane theory more could have been fabricated. It would have been a lot easier to fabricate that than to fabricate the stuff on the other side. So I come down on agreeing with Bob Bowman, who's probably the smartest 9/11 truther I ever met, and he's a Caltech rocket science Ph.D. and former head of the SDI program under two presidents, who was firmly convinced that the planes would have been remotely hijacked, or actual planes would have been remotely hijacked and flown into targets. That would be the way that you would do this. So he kind of reverse engineered it that way. So that's the position I came down to. And I know there are people who want to debate it, and there are also some really, emotional people who don't want to debate it. They just want to scream at you. Like a certain guy won't even talk to me anymore because, he got so upset about my views on this particular issue. So I don't think it's a very useful issue to get people super riled up about, because what does it really matter how the illusions of hijacked plane crashing into buildings were created? We all admit they were illusions. We all admit that there were no actual human hijackers on board any planes that day, right? So ultimately, we know that the perpetrators used technical means to create the illusion of human hijacked planes. Since we agree on that, that tells us, pretty much points at the perpetrators. It would be the same people, even if they had some other weird methodology of holograms or something, right? Still the same people. Still no hijackers, right? No Muslims, no radical Muslims, no hijackers. Either way, in any way you cut it, that's the case. So I don't think it's worth having these big fights about no planes, since we can basically agree, who did this and why, and that's the important thing.
Other thing, real quick, if I can scrounge up an email address for you, is it okay if I have a short email dialogue with you about kind of Muslimism? I have some questions about things, because there's talk of the Muslims basically moving in with the intent of taking over America, and I don't know, there may be factions that are trying to do that, and other than that, I don't know. So but this is because that is a sort of a religious tangent. I would like to carry that out with email dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to email me, and I'll do what I can. But just the quick answer to that, of course, is that what you're saying is totally the product of Jewish Zionist control of American media that's created this bizarre, utterly distorted image of the religion of Islam, the attitudes of Muslims, et cetera, et cetera. So, essentially, it's kind of a projection. I mean, there really is a Jewish supremacist project to grab more and more wealth and power and ultimately enslave all non-Jews. Yeah, that's the basic eschatology of Judaism. And that radical faction has seized control, essentially, of the most powerful faction within that religion. And so then, in order to cover for that, they've invented all of this complete nonsense about Islam. That's my short answer.
Okay. Okay, next we have Joe Olson. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to begin with a quote from Natafi Bennett this last week. It was actually on the February 17th. Quote, Turkey is the new Iran, a sophisticated and dangerous adversary who seeks to encircle Israel. End of quote. And then what he doesn't say is what they've all been saying all along is that, and reach is too big. We need to take down Egypt. Basically, they're trying to relive the Enon plan, which is to take everything between the Euphrates and the Nile. But then we also, in the Epstein emails, we have proof that Ehud Barak, who was a former prime minister, but at the time he was in the intelligence group, he and Epstein had numerous emails over the weapons shipments for Iran Contra, and they also had a bunch of emails prior to 9/11. And then we have Ted Postal over at MIT, who's a missile expert. It would happen depending on the accuracy of the missiles that Iran launches with multiple strikes on Tel Aviv, and it wasn't going to take a couple of dozen hypersonic missiles to basically level Tel Aviv. And then we have a guy named Mohammed OD, which is Mohammed OD, which is his name on YouTube, who said that it's going to be really simple for Iran to take out Israel because Israel depends on 5 desalination plants that are on the Mediterranean coast. All of them are non-protected, and they provide 85% of the drinking water for Israel. So he said, bottom line is, you hit these non-hardened sites with a simple little missile in each one, and you're without water for several months. And there's no way you can support a population of 8 billion people in that particular space. He said everybody will evacuate Israel within 2 weeks.
Right. That's probably a slight exaggeration, but maybe not all that much of one. Yeah, that's there. I think there are a lot of vulnerabilities in Israel. So let's see. Your question began with, I think, Erdogan, and Nathalie Bennett saying that Erdogan.
Uh-oh, I lost you again. Oh dear. I hope you come back, Kevin.
Okay.
We lost you for about almost a minute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't tell here, and it's my control panel is telling me that my connection is fine. So I don't know.
Oh,
But uh, in any, should I try? Want me to try reconnecting, or would that screw up the recording?
no, it won't screw up the recording. It just will look a little odd. Let's see. Did anybody else comment about? Was it? Did Kevin freeze up for the rest of you too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not quite a minute, some maybe 30 seconds.
Okay.
But yes.
All right. Yeah, that sounds about right. We lost about 20 seconds of your answer. So maybe you can just repeat your answer.
Okay, here I'm gonna turn off the Wi-Fi. So now I'm only on the wired connection. Maybe that'll help. Okay.
Okay.
So my answer is first that the question was about Bennett saying that Turkey is the new Iran in terms of being a threat to Israel. And that's, of course, just a symptom of this, Zionist derangement syndrome. Like they can't imagine why their neighbors don't like them when basically they invaded the Holy Land that's holy to 5 billion Christians and Muslims with a fanatical Jewish supremacist agenda saying that because God gave us this land thousands of years ago, we have the right to murder and expel the people who live there now. Well, naturally, the people of that region and everybody in the world who's been paying any attention says that's completely crazy. You guys are psychopaths. You can't just come and steal land and murder and expel people because you say that your tribal deity gave you this land thousands of years ago. That's insane, right? So, but they don't get that. So they just keep on slaughtering, expelling people, robbing them in the most outrageous ways, mistreating them, torturing them, raping them, just exercising, these kinds of practices that make stereotypical Nazi practices look pretty tame. And they can't understand why everybody in the world who's paying attention, which does include the whole region, has no use for this. And, they can use raw power and terror and money to try to buy off the leadership of regional countries. But the people of all those countries know what's up. They've bought off the leadership to some extent here in Morocco. But the people of Morocco loathe Zionism and would put an end to it in 2 seconds if they had the chance. And the same with everybody across this whole region. So they're imagining that it's Iran's fault. Oh, but now that we think we're going to be able to maybe get rid of that problem, oh, now it's Turkey's fault. And who knows whose fault it's going to be next? They had problem before it was Egypt. They fought the wars in 67 and 73. They've been fighting the Palestinians, of course, the people that they're genociding, and on and on and on. So, yeah, sure, it's Turkey and every other country in the region, backed by 95+% of public opinion in this region. But this region, I mean the whole Middle East, North Africa, MENA region, and perhaps even beyond, will grab any chance they get to rid the world of this scourge, of this genocidal criminal regime that's occupying the Holy Land and making a case for itself as the Antichrist, really, right? So that's why these paranoid lunatics like Bennett are rambling on about all these enemies. Well, of course these people have enemies. Look at how they treat other people. Look at how they see the people outside their tribe. They use their N word. It's the G word, the goyim, to describe the beings without souls. The traditional Jewish religion actually does hold, or at least many commentators in that tradition hold, that only Jews have souls. And the non-Jews, the goyim, are just animals, like cattle and sheep, and you can do anything to them that you could do to cattle and sheep. In fact, you should. That's our job as Jews. That's baked into the religion. And of course, they had to lie about this for thousands of years so that they could survive amidst other populations. So they've got this thousands of years of practice lying about their extreme ethnocentrism. And during that period, they've also been selecting for high IQs and jobs that require, high-paying, enriching jobs that, or niches, economic niches that favor cleverness. So you've got people formed by that background. That culture has produced these people, and a lot of them, don't really fall into these kinds of categories I'm discussing completely. But that there's a huge cultural load of momentum pushing in this direction. And so then I say, oh, well, we have all these terrible enemies. They all hate us. They want to throw us in the sea. They want to throw us in the gas chambers. Of course you have enemies because you lie and you steal and you systematically view everybody else as animals to be exploited, just like Jeffrey Epstein did, and his friend Noam Chomsky, and God knows how many of these people. So anyway, that's my thoughts about Bennett saying that Turkey is the new Iran. And the other parts of the question, I'm sorry, what was the second part? Hello?
I guess I don't
Is that
remember.
Tim Olson or
Yeah.
who's? Oh no, Bob or
Yeah.
Tim
Yeah,
or who?
yeah.
I think he's lost his connection.
Yeah, I hear you fine.
The other part was Ehud Barak involved in 9/11 and Iran-Contra.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, the Epstein emails, of course, reveal that Barak was a close collaborator with Epstein, that Israel built the surveillance architecture in Epstein's mansion with the excuse of Barak's visits. And yeah, Barak being involved in Iran-Contra, of course, we all know that the Israelis played a big role in Iran-Contra, and then the related coup d'etat against Jimmy Carter that essentially remove Jimmy Carter from office by ruining his chances in the 1980 re-election campaign, by ensuring that American hostages would be held in Tehran until after Reagan was inaugurated, right? So it's not really surprising that Barack and Israeli intelligence behind him were are being exposed in these Epstein emails, and we're in the thick of Epstein's blackmail operation.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Al. Go ahead, Al.
Yes, getting back to Epstein's hunting trip and the direct action to 9/11 and Trump.
Al, we can't really make out what you're saying. Your internet is weak.
The million.
Yeah, maybe if you turn off your video, it will be better. Because we can't hear you.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Is that any better?
Yes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So I was drawing the connection between the remaining 3 million files that haven't been exposed yet, and the Trump's connection to 9/11. If that's one of the reasons that he's refusing to expose or have those 3 million files exposed, and your opinion on that, and how many Congress people and the government have been compromised through Epstein's operation, and what your thoughts are on that. Did you hear me all right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Trump being involved in 9/11 per se, although it's possible that there would be incriminating communications with Epstein around that. I think it's more likely that Trump was a sexual blackmail target. And
exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know how many of the remaining files would expose something like that. They just haven't wanted to come clean on any of that stuff, and how much of it is related to Epstein.
Yeah, the release of these files has really been chaotic and slipshod. It looks like incompetence. Maybe they needed to look that way, but it's of course they're not complying with the Epstein Transparency Act, which required everything to be released by late December. And perhaps part of the reason that it's been so slow is that there are these potential national security issues that's how they would think of 9/11 stuff. It would be a national security issue. Maybe they even think Trump's sexual crimes are a national security issue as well. And so it's quite possible that higher ups in the Justice Department are trying to scrub the files, and perhaps ordinary employees in the department are not happy with that agenda, which could explain some of the glitches and the releases of things that maybe the higher ups didn't really want released.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. And Mike, is that Mike Figa?
Yep. How's it going, Kevin?
Hey, hi, Mike.
I wanted a game theory, a serious engagement with Iran, because I think there's kind of two options, right? I think that simply taking out the Iranian regime, isn't really what their goal is, because as we know, they want all of Palestine, and obviously they're grabbing parts of other countries, and who knows where they intend to stop, right? But I do think the engagement with Iran would be kind of their quote unquote final solution, where concurrent with that, really an orchestrated serious regional war, if not a quote unquote global war, they would finish the job, as the revisionist Zionists say. And I'm not sure what kind of U.S. anti-missile, anti-ballistic tech they have. So, I mean, I think they're also trying to coincide with a lot of biblical things as well. So, the question is there a more advanced Iron Dome, and they think that they can roll the dice and and get away with this. But I guess what I was trying to say is, give me your thoughts between the two different options. Simply decimating Iran seems to put them back because they still have the problem of the Palestinians they can't get rid of, but they want the land, especially on the rump state of Palestine that's occupied.
Right. So, yeah, a nightmare scenario here, which we've been, it's been out on the table for decades now, is that Israel might want a huge regional war that would be so bad that they could get away with massacring much of the population of Palestine and finishing the job, right? They've had this so-called demographic problem that the Palestinians have not gone away, and international public opinion has not allowed them to, just instantly slaughter, 7 million Palestinians. So people like Alan Hart, my former radio guest, who used to be the BBC lead correspondent for the entire Middle East and was a good friend of Golda Meir and Yasser Arafat, was very much afraid that the Israeli leadership was planning to start a huge regional war. And under cover of this war, they would finish off the Palestinians, massacre and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, and somehow expel the rest. And so that idea of finishing the genocide of Palestine under the fog of war has been out there for a long time. And that might explain why the Israelis are hell-bent on starting this huge, terrible war that would be such a loser for everybody and would cause them so much damage. It's possible that from their viewpoint, they think that accepting a lot of damage would be worth it if they can then use that as their excuse to massacre and finish off the remaining Palestinians.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a high probability. You mean there's the gold menorah, right by the Temple Mount, the red heifers, and the whole West Bank is, what I mean, the quote unquote fringe, which we know is totally allowed by the Israeli state, which is insane. They're committing pogroms daily, murders, beatings. So I think that they could, under the fog of war, they could probably empty the West Bank, and then Gaza, as we know, is concentrated in the south. So then under the cover of a war, they could pretty much get that gate open because, we can't feed them or give them water and, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of do think that, and the other thing I wanted to say is just to take out Iran doesn't mean much to Israel because, as you know, conflict has been their excuse for creeping expansion forever, right? They got away with the Nakba and then they've been expanding since 67. So I think conflict has always been something they've fomented, they've enjoyed because they have, a clear power imbalance. Now people can question exactly what Iran could do. But I guess what I'd say is to remove their boogeyman is actually something they wouldn't want to do unless it was part of their kind of final agenda that we all kind of feel bubbling up. But thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And for, we could mention this messianic millenarian fever that the Zionists have, or especially some of them, the radical wing, it's matched by something, a different kind of messianic millenarianism in Iran. The Iranian Shia tradition awaits the return of Jesus and the Mahdi being a rightly guided Muslim leader. And the Islamic eschatology is just like the Christian eschatology, basically, is that at the end times, Jesus comes back and love and justice reign on earth. And so the Iranian religious eschatology awaits this Jesus, right, and love, compassion, and justice, and that will reign on earth. That's what they're out for, and they see, and I think rather unfortunately, all too accurately, the Zionists as the equivalent of Antichrist. And of course, theologically and historically, that's true. I mean, what are Jews? Jews are the people of that group who didn't accept Jesus as their Messiah. And so they despised Jesus and spread, horrible, disgusting rumors about him and his mother. And so they've been the party of the Antichrist. That is the people called Jews, or the Jewish religion per se, which becomes Talmudic Judaism after the time of Jesus. What it is it's just the group of those people that heaped hatred on Jesus and his doctrine of love, peace, and justice. right? So that we have this eschatological conflict between the people who see the end times as being a time of ushering in love and peace and justice, and that's essentially the eschatology of Christianity and Islam, both of which accept Jesus as the true Messiah, and then the Antichrist eschatology of Judaism, which has mutated into this extremely virulent criminal genocidal form as it has committed genocide in the Holy Land. So there is a strong eschatological religious tension here that is sort of hovering over this military conflict that's looming around Iran.
Yep, yep. And then I guess one other quick comment, and I loved your interviews with Alan Hart. And it's very much played up how much everyone is, the Jews are always the victim, right? The perfect victim. It's obviously absurd. We see the issues there. Of course, they can be victims as a collective. But he had his books, Zionism, the Real Enemy of the Jews. I'm actually hoping in the coming years, and I don't know, but the way information has been flowing is to get your average nominal Jew and religious Jew, and some of them are seeing this, right? That their own enemy is a really maniacal elite, and some of them are atheists. Some of them, I don't even know what they're. People may say there's occult things going on as well, or these weird, who knows if Sabbateans or Frankists are still running around. Given how many they had, a few hundred years ago, I think there probably are some strains. But I guess one way I think to wake them up is to have them view their own elites as a very abusive elite, which is obviously hiding behind the Jewish collective and at times just decimates them or has people turn on them as a way to protect them as an elite. But
yeah, I agree. And I translated From Yahweh to Zion by Laurent Guyonneau, which is both a history of Judaism and the Jewish people, and then also a plea to Jewish people to look critically at their own tradition and to step away from the abusive side of it and try to find either just leave it behind, as many people have, or to find a way of reframing Judaism as something ethical. And so that's a really interesting debate. And I think that what happens within the community of people who are born Jewish and terrorized from childhood into acquiescence to their demonic elite, and then some of them figure this out and get some distance from it, and others not so much. But that kind of fight within the Jewish community, which we're seeing the good side winning actually among the younger generation in the West, will have a lot to do with the outcome.
yeah. I mean, yeah, one last comment. I would say exactly that shift is there among the youth and maybe in the adults and some of the older folks. And a lot of them are just kind of passive and obviously brainwashed, right? I mean, we're all collectively brainwashed in the West, and then especially within that strong identity group. But I was going to say, yeah, I think their elites prop up some of the worst, most maniacal people. I mean, anti-Semitism is literally a currency for Zionists and the state of Israel. So the very odd thing that people don't realize that I tell people is they need anti-Semitism. They push it. They've even done false flag anti-Semitic attacks, numerous ones. So anti-Semitism is something that their elites actually like, and they also put up these kind of reprehensible hacks, to defend Israel and pretend that they represent the Jewish collective, let's say I hate the word diaspora, right? Jews in the United States or elsewhere. When in reality, it's a lot more nuanced, and there's the Dave Smiths and a lot of people who are just like, oh man, they're yeah. You basically don't get a good feel for the actual community from the talking heads.
Indeed not. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to go next. First of all, just a couple of quick comments. I want to thank you for mentioning 1967 in Egypt, and just want to highlight the attack on the USS Liberty, which was obviously trying to attempted false flag to attack Egypt. And they were not supposed to have any survivors, but there were survivors, and they're still talking. Secondly, I want to thank you for mentioning Bob Bowman. I was in regular contact with him, drove down from Massachusetts to Florida for his funeral, and miss him dearly. But anyway, so as far as Judaism goes, we have a lot of very good 9/11 activists uh, within Boston 9/11 Truth and otherwise that are Jewish. Jews are a diverse group, much like Protestantism is. There's many different sects of Jews, and the the question I have about your comment that the Jews believe the goyim, meaning non-Jews, don't have souls. Is that in the Torah or the Talmud, or where is that written?
It's in the Talmud, but we should remember that the Talmud it's got a lot of different perspectives of rabbis debating each other over the centuries. So it's not wholly writ in the sense that it's not like they believe that God said this. But the Talmud is a book of interpretations of the Torah. And within the Talmud, there is this teaching that the Goyim don't have souls like the Jews. And it is, I think it's somewhat contested, but I think it's actually the kind of dominant interpretation. Israel Shahak's book, or actually, I think a couple of books. The work of Israel Shahak is a good place to start on this. Israel Shahak was an Israeli Jewish scholar who basically did some fantastic work unearthing some of this material on the kind of the downside of the Jewish tradition. And for an introduction to that, I would recommend the work of Ron Unz. I publish at unz.com, unz.com. And Ron he comes from a Jewish ethnic background, and he's one of many Jewish people who've very much critically deconstructed that background and have seen it for what it really is. And Ron has written some wonderful introductions to this topic. Let's see if you go to unz.com, UNZ, and do some searching for the articles of Ron Unz about Judaism, you'll find, I think, maybe the best introduction to this topic of really the shocking degree of ethnic supremacism in the Jewish tradition that was always concealed because Jews lived among other people and they couldn't just come right out and state the extent to which they viewed themselves as a higher being. But that was a big part of that tradition. And then, of course, it's been reinforced by the fact that this community has generally had relatively lucrative economic slots overall, and that the leadership in particular has managed to infiltrate very high parts of whatever societies that the group was living in. Anyway, so yeah, the best place to start would be Israel Shahak, Shahak, and then Ron Unz at unz.com.
Well, just a couple of follow-up comments. There are a lot of Jews who are speaking out against Zionism and what the state of Israel is doing. Jewish Voices for Peace. There's a bunch of rabbis in New York who speak out against it, etc. So, I just uncomfortable with lumping a whole group together. The equivalent is Christians say non-Christians can't get into heaven. A lot of Christians say that. And that's actually taught in some Christian sects. So that I would hate to think that all Christians would be lumped together into feeling they're the exclusive inhabitants of heaven. I just get uncomfortable when I hear broad brush like that.
Yeah, I do too. I used to even more than I do now. There are lots of people who are born Jewish who are very secular in orientation and are not really that different from other secular people in their orientation. But to various degrees, this tribal programming that's developed over thousands of years can still have an effect on them, as it did, for example, on Chomsky. And I don't think the comparison with Christianity is quite as to be more accurate about what we're dealing with in terms of the Jewish culture. I think the comparison would be more with, let's say, Romani people or Gypsies. In both cases, you have a small minority of people who have wandered around and interacted with dominant cultures all over the world and done so in a way that arguably is often somewhat parasitical and or criminal, and that has found its niche. Now, not everybody who's born Romani is necessarily going to pick your pocket, but there is a kind of ethnocentrism in Romani communities, and in a different way, a kind of ethnocentrism, let's say, in Amish communities. I love Amish people. Very, they helped build me my log house in Wisconsin, but they're very ethnocentric, and like every generation, half of the kids leave and become just mixed with the rest of the people. But the ones who stay Amish have these particular characteristics, and they fit into a particular economic niche, and they are very much, us versus them, ethnocentric group that sees outsiders as being very, very different. And same is true with Jews traditionally, and Romani people. And so if you run into like really tribalist Romani people in the streets of a major European capital, hang on to your wallet, you know. And the same is true with Jews in a much bigger and worse way. Okay, and that doesn't mean that everybody born Jewish or born Romani is the same. There are Romani people who become great musicians and would never cover for their pickpocket fellow tribespeople, right? There are such people. There are a lot of them, and same with Jews. But this is the culture. Let's be honest about it. And we're brainwashed. We're so brainwashed because this particular culture, the most powerful people in it, who are really the worst people in it, have taken over our media. They've taken over our government. They've hijacked our government. They've taken us to war. They did 9/11. It's. I think the problem is not so much people like me who could be seen as exaggerating this problem. The problem is people who are not seeing how grave it really is.
Okay, finally, we have one last question. Roy has another question. Go ahead, Roy.
Actually, there are any number of things that have come up. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been a very interesting time here, and I do thank you for coming to speak with us, as the earlier person said. I look back at my emails, and I just said 2010. Actually, most of them were in 2009. The last one was in 2013 up until 2023, when I have one mail with a reply address for Kevin's newsletter. So I must have seen Kevin's newsletter at some point. If I wrote to that reply Kevin's newsletter, would that reach you, or do you have a published email address? Or
That would probably work. Yeah,
I
I
can't
don't
hear
know
you.
if that's my Substack. You can
I
find me
can't
at
hear
Kevin.
you. Uh,
I'm
oh,
at
oh, okay.
Kevin Kevin Barrett dot
Okay, you're on
Substack.
Substack. Okay. Okay. So you can be reached via Substack.
Yes.
Okay, I can't. I'm afraid I don't know why suddenly can't hear you. I could hear you
We hear him,
before.
we hear him just fine.
Susan, is there something going on?
No, it's you.
My hand was lowered twice. That was strange.
Yeah, mine got lowered once too.
I can hear my. Oh, wait a minute.
Your headphones
Oh
aren't
no.
working. Your headphones
Oh,
aren't
why does my headphones always go out when I'm on a 911 call? I've lost my sound. This is just wonderful. Can you hear? You can hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Oh, okay. I can't hear you, but I'll have to read your text. This is very strange. Um, the you said that all of us didn't believe that there were hijackers, and I would question that, because there are people connected with the 9/11 truth movement who do believe that there were hijackers. And, Tucker Carlson is talking about hijackers, and what, Mike Rossi or whatever his name is. And if you believe that there were planes, you're either believing in remote control, as you do, or in some kind of hijacker scenario. So I just wanted to mention that there is not universal agreement on there not having been hijackers. I was surprised that you didn't mention that the people that you're talking about are not the people who were in Palestine at the time, way back then when the Jews were having their thing with Jehovah, but they were the Khazarian people who converted to Judaism later on. You know all about that, but you didn't mention it. I thought I would. Um, uh, and the I was not planning on mentioning planes and no planes issue. And I was kind of sorry that Bob brought it up. and uh, I would just very briefly comment here, since we're at the end here, that it wasn't about the buildings getting hit with an explosive, but there's like an agreement among the no plane people that there were that 175 was a missile, and it was cloaked one way or another, and that a plane could not go that fast. I won't go into that. I'll just ask you finally, as a kind of a good wrap-up question here for comments, general comments on the 9/11 truth movement, which you haven't proposed yet today, and I'm sure you have views on that you might wish to express or not mind expressing. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So the question was about just an invitation. Well, first, okay, the fact that the people who are claiming the right to invade, occupy, and commit genocide in the Holy Land, based on the claim that their tribal deity gave this land to them thousands of years ago, whether to what extent they may or may not be the descendants of people who lived in that part of the world thousands of years ago is completely irrelevant. This claim is insane. Even if they were 100% descended from people from that part of the world thousands of years ago, it's still insane, equally insane. It's like if I were going to create a Celtic homeland by saying we American Celts are going to invade and occupy the British Isles because our god Thog, the tribal deity of the Celts, gave us this land thousands of years ago. We're going to murder and expel the people who live in the British Isles today and replace them because our God gave. So I go take a genetic test and it shows that I'm 100% Celtic, and my ancestors lived in the British Isles. Is that relevant to the fact? No, it's insane. It's equally insane whether or not I had any ancestors there or not. So I think that whole argument about whether they're Khazarians or whether they're Semites or whatever is, I mean, I guess it's sort of interesting, but it's a total red herring and has no bearing whatsoever on the legitimacy, or rather the utter and complete lunacy and grotesque illegitimacy of the Zionist project. So that's my thoughts on that. And as for the 9/11 truth movement, uh, I think that we, this fraud has had such a huge effect on history. And we're seeing it today as we're on the brink of a potential World War III and this crazy attempt to attack Iran. You really can't exaggerate how important this issue is. So everybody who's been doing it has been contributing to a really important cause. And we may have made various tactical mistakes and so on. We were up against a really powerful organized force that has been a step ahead of us in many cases. But the fact that we're doing it and continuing to do it is really important. And now we've got people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Cenk Uygur, people with huge audiences who are now admitting that we were right all along, is very encouraging. So I think we should persevere. I don't have that much faith that I can figure out how this 9/11 truth work that we do will improve the world and improve the course of history. I have no faith that, I don't know how that could possibly work really anymore. I used to think that it would. I used to think if we blew this case wide open in a timely fashion, we could really improve the world. Now, not so sure, but it's still definitely the right thing to do. So congratulations to all of you for your contributions to the 9/11 truth movement.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's really an honor to have you join us. And I just wanted to add one more comment. I meant to ask comment before when I raised my hand. The whole term anti-Semite, are Palestinians Semite?
The word Semite is confusing. It goes back to a 19th century confusion between language and ethnicity. The linguists discovered language families. They discovered there was this thing called the Semitic language family that included Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, and a couple of other languages. And they imagined that the peoples who spoke that language were somehow racially related and inferior to white Europeans, or at least some thought that way. So that led to this notion of this Semitic race, which is a misnomer. There's no such thing. And then this very misleading term anti-Semitism, which meant sort of anti-Jewish feeling, is based on this ridiculous idea that there's such a thing as a Semitic race. It's a language category. It has nothing to do with race. So the whole thing is just one big pile of confusion. And really, the whole notion of Semitic should be just retired, and used in linguistics, but nowhere else.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to be publishing this recording on Rumble and YouTube and our website, boston911truth.org. And we thank you very much for joining us in this very special, very insightful meeting. And thank you to all the participants for your very thoughtful questions. And hope you all join us again on March 5th when we have Sander Hicks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody. And say hi to Sander for me.
I will.
Thank you.